I remember I was a sophomore in university studying early childhood education, and in order to graduate, there were a few classes that were mandatory. Unfortunately, one of those classes was statistics. I was never good with statistics. It's one of those subjects my mind couldn't process even though I would study regularly. Now, we were about halfway through the year, approaching midterms, and I was really struggling. If I didn't do well on this midterm, I would have to redo the entire course. I can still visualize the classroom as I took my seat at the back. The professor was at the front going on about how the exam was going to work and what tools we needed, and honestly, even if he had given me the answer key, it wouldn't have helped much. We began the exam, and as I flipped through the entire booklet, I slowly began to realize I wasn't going to pass. I still decided to attempt each question. Once I had completed the exam, I handed it to the professor and left the classroom defeated. A few weeks later, we got our results back. The professor placed mine in front of me, upside down. I can hear some of the other students sharing marks and congratulations with each other, and when I turned my exam around, I saw the grade. 2%. For a second, I thought I was looking at a milk carton. 2%? Are you kidding me? I couldn't remember anything the professor said from that point on. When we had a break, I left the class and headed straight to the chapel. Devastated, I began to talk to God and ask him, so what next? After I'd finished pouring out my soul, I remember hearing a small voice tell me, do what I created you to do. I instinctively knew what that meant and applied to film school the next day. Long story short, I got in and I thrived. It was in film school that I got my first 101%. I'll share that story another day. Throughout this whole experience, though, I learned a very valuable lesson which Dr. Hart expounds on in the 6th chapter of his book, Habits of the Mind. Failing doesn't make you a failure. Think about it. When a toddler is trying to learn something new, they fail constantly, but they don't stop. They keep making attempts, and with each failure, they mentally grow exponentially. But as we get older, something changes within us. We start to fear failure because we attach our accomplishments to our identity. As I read this chapter, I came across a mind-opening quote. Sometimes, God speaks loudest through our apparent failures. I believe failures are an important part of being human, and if you spend your entire life avoiding, or even worse, living in fear of failure, you'll never give yourself a chance to succeed. If we know in our heart that God uses failure to refine us, why does failure devastate us? Hart touches on 2 reasons. Failure devastates us because it points out our imperfections. It reveals the fragility of our strength, and that is an emotionally uncomfortable place to be because you're in a vulnerable state. Second, failure devastates us because we irrationally confuse failing with being a failure. Remember this, failing doesn't make you a failure. Giving up does. This chapter taught me that failure isn't meant to be my identity. It's meant to be used as a tool for growth. Steve Davis once said, "It may not be your fault for getting down, but it has got to be your fault for not getting up." A successful Christian life is not gonna look like a successful worldly life. Take Christ our Lord, for example. From a human standpoint, the life of Christ was an absolute failure. But from God's viewpoint, it was a tremendous triumph because it fulfilled his perfect plan for the world. The difference between success and failure is perspective. His ministry lasted 3 years. He died the death of a criminal. He wasn't tangibly rich, yet now he sits at the right hand of God. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems like a celestial success. Now, when I look back at my academic failure, I can't say in all honesty that it was a complete failure. Had I not gone through that experience, I would have never applied to film school. I think I would have just gone on living my life, not doing what God called me to do, and in the grand scheme of things, that is true failure. Because you never get to see what God does for you and experience the highs and lows with him, deepening your trust in his faithfulness. Today, I just want to remind you that God did not call you to be successful. He called you to be faithful. Trust me, I know what it feels like to not only fail miserably, but feel like a failure. And let me tell you, just because you fail doesn't mean you're a failure. Know this. Because of your faith in Jesus Christ, the God of all creation looks at you and smiles. I say again with all the sincerity I can muster, in God's kingdom, there is no such thing as failure, and today I give myself permission to fail. Because who knows what destiny lies beyond the disappointment? What new direction is to follow? Whatever it is, I've learned to see failure as a disguise for God's best plan for my life. I invite you to do the same. I'll leave you with this question. When you experience failure, do you make it your identity, or do you use it as a tool for growth? In the next video, we'll discuss the third healthy habit. Keep your conscience clear. In the meantime, if you've fallen, get back up, keep your eyes focused on Christ, and capture every thought.